Abolition is for Everybody is a podcast that tackles the sometimes difficult conversations around prison abolition. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Graham. This season is all about the journey of incarceration, from arrests to sentencing, family connections, parole hearings, and reentry.
Just a reminder, friends, though the title of this episode may give you some warning, remember that harm itself tends to create situations of alternate harms.
There will likely be other painful topics brought up too. Take care of you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Abolition is for Everybody. On this episode, we're going to be talking about Board of Parole hearings. Board of Parole hearings are conducted to determine if someone should be granted parole and released from prison. Today, we're joined by Juan Gamez. Juan, welcome to Abolition is for Everybody. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, my name is Juan Gamez. I'm here to share about the Board of Parole hearings process. I think that it's something that is an experience that not a lot of people go through, and I happen to have to go through that experience. So it can be very intimidating. I was sentenced to 15 years to life sentence for a crime I committed when I was 16. So I was considered a lifer. So as a lifer, you have to go to the Board of Parole hearings, and I was granted parole on my first hearing in 2022, and I've been home for 8 months now. So I'm excited to share, give an insider's perspective into it.
Welcome home, Juan. Really glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome home, Juan. It's great seeing you. For our listeners who are not familiar with Board of Parole hearings, before we deep dive into your story and how that experience was for you, can you talk a little bit more about what the Board of Parole hearings is and who is a part of that? Sure.
So the Board of Parole hearings is a body of commissioners who have the duty to evaluate an inmate, a lifer most times, and to consider like his risk factors. Is the person suitable for parole? Is he still a danger to society? Is he not? Or is she not? And they make the decision based on your history about the crime, like your past, your upbringing, your behavior during prison, any change, maturity. Like there's a lot of factors that go into it that people don't realize, and it can be very extensive. So the commissioners they have various backgrounds. Nowadays, they have included people with psychology degrees, people from other backgrounds that are not law enforcement, but in the past used to be like retired COs, sheriffs, like ex-police officers. So it was very rough to kind of like walk into this room, these spaces, and be see different when, you know how the saying goes, like when you're a hammer, everything is a nail. So I feel like in the past, that was like the from what I heard, that was the experience for a lot of lifers walking into these rooms, being considered just a number or just another inmate. So the Board of Parole hearings used to just evaluate you. They evaluate you, and they deem you suitable or not suitable for parole. And if you are found not suitable, you get a 3-year denial, which means come back in 3 years or 5 years, 7, 10, or 15, whichever they deem appropriate. So when you are a lifer, that's the biggest thing, that you have no parole date. You don't have a date to get out. So when you go into these processes, you start sometimes this wheel when you start like revolving back and back when you're not found suitable, because they don't consider you suitable to get out yet. So that's essentially the job that the Board of Parole hearings holds in California.
Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned that the Board of Commissioners. How many commissioners are seated on the panel?
When I went to my hearing, it was just 2. But I've heard
two?
that, yeah, all the times there's 3 or 4. It depends on the person in the hearing. I don't know how many form the whole body of commissioners. I think it's over 10 or 20. Yeah.
And you mentioned that people with psychology degrees have recently been elected to be in positions on the board. Do you feel like, I kind of have an answer to this, but I want to know your perspective. Do you feel like they're more fair and impartial than previously?
Yeah. So when I entered prison, it was 2015. In 2015, you will hear maybe 1 or 3 lifers get found suitable in the whole yard, right? So as changes in the laws were happening, and as changes in the body of the Board of Parole hearings were happening, you start hearing more people go home, more lifers get found suitable, right? So I think that change is due to the fresh minds in the board, to the new understanding we have about the human brain, about change, and the and just like the psychology. I think like a person with a psychology degree, you gotta understand more like the brain processes, right? The mind processes, and you don't have that bias that sometimes comes with working in the system, right? Whether you are an inmate or whether you are an officer, it changes you. The system is going to change you regardless. So somebody that comes from a background that doesn't pertain to any of that, then you have like an outsider's perspective, like a clear vision, if you will.
I'm going to be honest, I have a psychology degree, and I feel like there's no way I can sit in front of an individual or individuals and be a deciding factor of whether or not that person should go home. Because one thing that I will dive deep into that I'm very interested in hearing y'all's perspective on is just how extensive and deeply uncomfortable and deeply traumatizing and deeply unfair that whole process is. And as someone with a psych degree, I can't imagine sitting in front of a person, hearing about everything they've gone through, and then being part of the vote about whether or not that person is or isn't deserving to go home based on the standards that they made up about whether or not a person is deserving or not deserving to go home. But that is coming through the perspective of someone with a psych degree and someone who's never been incarcerated. So I'm curious to know what y'all's perspectives is on that.
I think that the side degree helps just to be objective, you know, like that's what like I was trying to like convey like objectivity, because if you have come from this background, maybe you will lean more to one side than the other, you know. So I think that it's hard to make that decision to be that deciding person about somebody's freedom, but because of the system we have, like somebody has to do it, you know. So when it comes to us being in the inside, we will hope that the people that do it is well informed, that they are very educated, that they are not biased, that they still see the humanity in us, ignore somebody that will be very biased, that has like a background that is anti-inmates, that is not for rehabilitation, because like you cannot predict like how somebody's going to turn out 10 years from today. We're constantly changing and evolving. And I think like when it comes to prison, like it's not like the movies anymore, you know. It changed. And even within prison, it's like an ecosystem. Like you have like a whole body of like people, like a sub society, if you will. And it has changed so much to the point where like when we started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, it became a choice, like a conscious choice. Like either you want to go home or you want to stay here. And it can be hard for somebody with a law enforcement background to embrace that, you know. So like, again, it comes to like being dedicated and having the potential to see past the biases. That's what I think the degree helps.
Yeah, I can totally see if I had to pick between a crystal with a psych degree and a CO or a cop, the crystal will give you the better chance of going home. So I can totally see that. Yeah.
I think what's coming to mind for me is like centering on there's a whole systemic process that takes place for someone to become a commissioner, let's say. So for anybody to work within the system, what I know to be true is you have to do their OJT training. For me to go I go into the prison for my other work. I still, even though I have a background of being previously incarcerated, have to go through the same training videos and workbooks as an officer does. And those training and workbooks create a bias, right? And then you couple that with biases that an individual may have from life, things they've experienced, family members who've been harmed by someone, personal experiences where they've been harmed, and then couple that with just like the biases that are present in the educational process for a degree. Now, I know because I was on the yards when parole date rates began going up. Like I was there and I started watching people go home, and I saw that light come on, that light appear at the end of the tunnel for people, myself included, although I did not go through the board process. And you're 100% right on that. And I think still it's a pretty rudimentary process to think that a person is going to join as a commissioner and have a completely unbiased a completely unbiased frame of mind when someone's talking about elements of harm. Automatically, when someone talks to me about something that they did to someone, my hackles go up. right? Because of things that I've experienced in life, because of things that I've witnessed or participated in. So it really takes a shift in mind to like allot someone that freedom, right? I think that it's, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to say that it feels rudimentary for me. Like it feels like them determining that the solution for you, for anybody, is okay, well, I guess 3 more years in prison and we'll do it, right? 3 more, 5 more years. My friend got a 10-year denial and I was like, that's a full ass sentence. 3 years is a sentence, but that's a full ass decade of your life, because you didn't show insight into something that the prison system doesn't give any tools for insight or remorse for.
Exactly. And you said something very important right now at the end. The prison system is not necessarily designed for you to get insight, you know, and they don't tell you what that is. And you have to figure it out, right? So we don't have psychologists going inside and teaching us this stuff. Like we have to teach ourselves, you know. I think that's the biggest thing. Like that journey changes you, you know. Like when I was in the beginning of my prison time, and I saw my sentence in front of myself, and I was like, man, it's gonna be a long time before I get to walk the streets again. If I get to walk the streets again, I think that all of us felt like hopeless. Like all of us went in that position at some point. Like we felt hopeless. We felt like, man, it was not even worth trying. But then when we saw the light in the tunnel, it's like, nah, like there is hope. There is a chance, right? And then it came to like figuring it out. The Board of Parole process changed me completely, you know. And even now, like as I've been home and like I met this guy who we're doing a project with, and in a minute of talking to this guy, I knew he was an ex-lifer in 1 minute, and he knew the same thing with me, you know. And then we looked at each other and we're like, "Hey, man, like, you're a lifer, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah." And like I knew you were a lifer too, because he just it sets the bar really high. You know, you have to like go within yourself and introspection and insight and remorse, and that's something like I don't think the average citizen does that. Like if you're like you're not forced to it, you know, to do it, and we have to do it. So that's why I believe that it's a crazy process. The board is crazy, you know.
If you're comfortable, because one thing that stood out to me that you said was that the Board of Parole hearings process changed you. And as I've shared with the listeners in the past, part of my work is that I've, at this point, have read thousands of stories from incarcerated people, and I hear about the frustration, anger, etc., about the Board of Parole hearings process. If you're comfortable, can you briefly walk us through what that day was like for you?
So it changed me. The Board of Parole process changed me because it stressed me out 2 years before I went to board. You know, like 2 years when I realized that I had 2 years to go to board, I was stressed out already. I was anxious. Like it put like so much pressure on me, and I knew that, for example, like for you to get found suitable, I was a gang member. I committed a very serious crime. I murdered somebody for the benefit of the gang. For me, the biggest questions were, why did you join the gang, and why did you commit your crime, right? And I wasn't somebody who even had the vocabulary growing up to know what I was feeling or to express myself, right? And when I was in the yards and I was like hopeless and I was being like a knucklehead, I couldn't answer that. Like I remember the first time a lifer asked me, "What makes you angry?" Like he was asking me, "What are your triggers?" And I couldn't answer to him. Like I was like, "Well, what you mean? What gets me angry, man?" Like disrespect gets me angry, you know. And that's a very shallow answer. Like anybody, you tell that to the average person, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a good answer, but what does that even mean? You know, what do you mean disrespect? Like what somebody embarrassing you, somebody, like, you know, like there's layers to this knowledge, right? There's layers to ourselves that as a regular, like an average person, I never questioned myself about it. And as a lifer, I had to, because I had to answer those two questions. Why did I join a gang, and why did I commit my crime? So for me, that sent me on this journey of self-discovery. I had to go in this self-discovery journey where I started writing my life, and I started discovering who I was. And every time I would write my life story, I would skip certain traumas because I didn't want to face them. And it came to the point where I knew that I had to write about it. And every time I write about it, I used to discover different things. I used to identify like a different emotion, a different thought, a different belief that was formed because of my experiences. So I began to face the pain, and when I was somebody that always like suppressed my emotions. I suppressed the pain. I suppressed the memories. Um, and when I came to face them at 23 years old, I cried like the kid that never cried, at those times. And it was so heavy and it was so like, it was a lot. So I wrote everything. Like the Board of Parole hearings ask you to write, like, they don't really ask you, but it's kind of like you have to tell them your life story. So an insight statement. That's your whole life story, right? And you started in a way that is very peculiar to me because you started in the day of your crime. So on October 26, 2011, for me, I senselessly and carelessly murdered Mr. Diego Davian for the benefit of the gang that I was. And I tell this story, and then I jump to my childhood, and I say I was born and raised in El Salvador. I was born in 1995 in the country of El Salvador, and then I start telling my life to answer why did I commit this crime. So you see, it's like you start from the crime, and then jump back to your life, and then come back to the crime, and then go towards your future. Like, how did you change? So it was just like understanding that it was a whole process. And then when I finally felt comfortable with my self-discovery, with my insight, and that day came, going to the board, I was up at 3:30 in the morning. I was nervous. I felt like I had like so much like stress, anxiety. I had been incarcerated 10 years and 7 months by then. And I felt that, it was crazy because the first year I couldn't see myself doing 5 years. I couldn't imagine myself doing 5 years. But once that decade passed, I was like, if another one has to come, it is what it is. I was I was already used to it. and I didn't want it to. It waited on me, but I knew that I have no other choice and I have to keep going. And the thought that kept coming back to me was like, how am I gonna come back to this dorm that I hate with a passion and face everything again? You know, how am I gonna? And I was like, well, with your head high, you're gonna come back with your head high, and you're gonna keep facing what you have to face, and it is what it is. But deep down in me, I was like, nah, like I don't want to do this no more. So I was up at 3:30 in the morning, and I was in a dog program um dorm. So I had access to therapy dogs. And that was beautiful because there was this little dog named Strella who I get to hang out for in the morning. And I used to talk to them because I was a dog handler before. So when I used to handle dogs, I would take him to my workouts. I would take him to the yard with me, and I would sit down somewhere, and I would talk to them. So for me, this was very therapeutic to prepare myself before the board. But just walking into there, it was so surreal. Like you walk and you know that your whole life is your future is gonna be decided in that moment. And like you can really be like you cannot be expressionless, but you have to like show enough emotion for them to see it, right? So the advice is like you cannot talk with your hands, because if you do, they're gonna think that you're impulsive, that you don't know how to control your body, right? If you cannot make too many facial expressions, because they're gonna like you're like everything, like you cannot look to the left, or you cannot like whatever, it's little things that they're gonna pick on, and they're gonna be like, oh, I saw that you were doing this, and like they're gonna like try to make something out of it that maybe it's not the case. So there's a lot of pressure on your body, on the words that you're gonna use, the emotion you're gonna convey, you know and yeah. So I don't know, maybe I went off topic a little bit.
That was a beautiful representation. I mean, it's traumatic. That's really just traumatic, having to frame yourself. I've always thought, because I've helped people prepare their board reports and I've worked with people, two things come to mind. One being the skills. Where do these skills come from? It comes from people who got board denials. It comes from people who got dates, meaning they got get to go home. It doesn't come from the system. Like, the system gives you no prep. All of the groups that are formed around the subject of board prep are formed by us. And so that's one thing that comes to mind. And the other thing that comes to mind is just how much of it is a performance. It's really like, so there's the insight and remorse that you're talking about digging into, telling your life story and doing your timeline. I've watched and I've gone through that myself, and I've watched people go through it. And it's like a deep dive into your spirit, your core, your psyche. But it's all like stuff that we've learned amongst ourselves. No person outside would say, do this process on your own. No, there's not a single educated person with a degree in psychology, the same people sitting on that board, that would say, go do this on your own, figure this out on your own. And then, we'll talk in 6 months or a year or whatever. Like, you go through that process with a professional. Thank the universe that you had the animals there, because that is super healing, but that's a late development in the system too. So like, I guess what's coming to mind is just the performative quality of like having to go in and contain your emotion in a way that a person who has no lived experience shared with you, so they can determine whether you're suitable or not. My friend that got denied 10 years, I mean, he had made decisions, stepped away from gang life, made very hard decisions. He just lacked speaking ability. He clammed up when he got in front of a room of people, and you see that a lot. They give him a 10-year denial. And he literally had no write-ups in 20 years, had done all the work, had built out his board packet sufficiently. I reviewed his board packet, I looked at it, but they started asking questions and he couldn't get the lead-ins the way that they ask you to tell your story. He just couldn't, he clammed up, so gave very short abbreviated answers. He got a 10-year denial. It's a whole additional sentence on top of what you've already completed.
Yeah, I heard, unfortunately, a lot of cases like that, and that was my fear too. That was my fear, that I prepared so much that I know I was gonna be open, but if I feel like there's that fear that what if if I don't say things the right way, you know, and like you said, like there's that almost that balance between not showing too much emotion and showing emotion, because one of the advice that other lifers used to give me was like, you better cry, you better go in there and cry, like if when you talk about the crime, right? And for me, like crying is hard, like, and I was like, I don't even cry when I talk about my traumas, like I was like, I'm not gonna cry, I can't cry. so but I was like, I was holding my hands, I interlaced my hands together, and I did it like halfway into the hearing. I realized that I was shaking, but I was just like, so I was like sitting straight up, and I was just so like tense, and I'm trying to answer everything in a calm way, and I'm shaking, and I'm like, oh man, that's crazy. And you cannot like you could like there was almost like that self-sabotage thought that came to me before the hearing, where my lawyer was asking me questions, and I was kind of like self-sabotaging myself and just answering like very shallow. And she was like, what are you doing? You know these answers, you know this, right? So then I get snapped out of it, and I was like, man, like I know these answers, like what am I doing? So it's like, so it was like a wake up thing, like I had to like go in there and give it my best, you know but the whole process, like even like before the board, like the psych evaluation, like I had a psych evaluation done. All of us go before the psych 6 months before your board hearing, and they give us an assessment. They give you a label and they give you an assessment. And I feel like when it came to mine, I was not pleased with it, because there was nothing that the psychologist can criticize about me, but two things. And one was that my parole plans, as far as where I was gonna live, and my past. So I had no write-ups. My whole time in prison, I had no write-ups. So there was nothing that he can really say like, oh boy, he has like committed these rules violations or anything, right? And I answered everything correctly. And they gave me a moderate medium raise for for reentry society. And my lawyer appealed that, because they were like, why would you give him moderate medium if I don't have anything recent, And it was just because of my age, because the psych believed that I was too young to be released. And he said it in the report. He recommended me to do more time. So I was walking into the board knowing that I already have the psych against me, like I'm already, like, this is a professional person that's saying like, no, he should do more time. And when it comes to like my case and crimes like mine, I understand why, because there's nothing that you can do to atone for that. So all those things came to my mind, and I feel like they do a very good job on hammering the belief that we don't deserve nothing, that we have nothing coming, right? And in a way, you have to like accept that. You have to accept it, because if like I met lifers that went in with a 7 years to life sentence and they've been down 37 years, 45 years, right? On a 7 to life. One of my bunkies, he started going to board in the 90s. And since the 90s, he kept getting theater denials. And I was with him in 2020, 2021. Since the 90s, he kept going. So I accepted that. And when they asked me how do I feel about the assessment, I told him that I didn't agree with it. That I didn't agree with it. However, I respected the clinician's opinion, because he was a professional man, and he was doing his job. And I had to advocate for myself and say, however, I'm not a moderate risk to society, because I have changed so much since who I was at 16 years old, that I know that I'm not a risk to society. So you have all these factors, and I'm telling you, like it just changes you. It changes the way you use language. It changes the way that you express yourself, the process, but it changes you from within, because once I understood who I was and what were some of the things that would trigger me, what were some of the things that are my warning signs, what are my coping skills, it empowered me. So I have like mixed emotions about board, um because I can understand why they made us learn all that stuff. However, like I told this to a friend, to Greg. I told Greg, I decided to change my life before I had insight. I decided to be a different person before all that, you know, and 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 that was a decision I stuck with in prison, and I went through hell to change my life in prison, and that was like I had to wrestle with that, and then I have to wrestle with the board, so it was just crazy.
I get that. I think like when I review the system and think of the components that I utilize to alter the way that I thought around things, to transform and shatter harmful belief systems, to make changes in my life. And then I think of what a system that actually worked with us and for us would do. Like I say, okay, so the process that it took for you to get insight and remorse, can that exist without prison? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Can it be done better? Absolutely, yes. Does a arbitrary amount of time need to be served before? And the answer is no, right? Before you achieve insight, the answer would be no. So like, absolutely, a person can achieve accountability, insight, remorse. They should be supported through the process by a professional, and incarceration is not needed. So there's so many steps in the board process and in the sentence prior to board, all of the harm that takes place all the way from pretrial all the way through the prison system, that is unnecessary to achieve the goal of getting Juan, getting Graham, getting those who are incarcerated to a point where they're willing to accept responsibility for their decisions, recognize the harm they've done, make amends for that harm, like feel remorse, because I mean, remorse is an emotion, but it's an emotion that we're taught to bottle from a very early age when we're socialized into society, to have insight, which, as you mentioned, the brain earlier, like the brain doesn't even have the tools, doesn't have the capacity to develop insight until a decade after when you were arrested, right? Like you don't have consequential thinking as a tool in your toolbox. A decade after you're arrested is when that started to develop. So like, that's what I review is like, how useful is this process? And I think like for me, and I don't know if you relate to this, the change that occurred in my life occurred in spite of prison. In spite of the things that I went through, the system often stepped in and tried to like mitigate or halt altogether any changes that I made, by canceling groups, by refining me, by confining me to my cell, by transferring me to a prison that doesn't have the stuff that I need. As I'm asking for the things that I need, it did the opposite. Do you feel that way about the board process?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the whole, like I said earlier, the whole prison system is not designed to rehabilitate you, right? If we were to be in a level 4, 3 or even an active 2 everything is there for you to throw your life away. It is hard to step aside from the politics, to be an outcast, and put yourself out there and say, I don't want to do this. Um, and like I was saying, like I made that decision, and I was in an active level 3 when I made that decision, and I had 13 of my former homies in there with me. So I had all the peer pressure to stay, you know. And I told myself, no, like I don't feel like I want to be this person anymore. To be honest, like I don't even think I had an aha moment. It was just a buildup of things. It was just a buildup of things, reflection, understanding, having remorse, understanding the pain and suffering I caused so many people with my lifestyle. And one day I just felt like I don't want to be this person anymore. I want to be somebody different. So when I made that decision, I knew what I was going to come after that. And I told myself, well, nothing that happens to me can is equal to the pain and suffering I caused so many other people. So I'm gonna take it. And I stuck with it. And going after transferring to a level 2 yard, where everything I was in, they looked at my file, they looked at my background, and they put me in the worst yard and the worst dorm, right? And I didn't want to be that no more. I didn't want to be that person no more. And I was stuck in this place where it was just so chaotic. And I remember feeling like it was pulling me back, a part of it. But at the same time, I was like, no, like I don't want to be this person no more, right? I said all that to say it's within you, because you can take a horse to the lake, but you cannot make him drink, right? Or however the saying goes. But that's what it was for me. Like I just reached a point where I made that decision and I stuck with it. And I feel like a lot of people in the system, they make this choice at different points in their lives, different points in their journey. But once you make it, it's like you realize, because like prison, like I used to tell myself, like I'm in a college campus. I'm just in a college campus. I'm just passing by, and I'm gonna make the best of it, you know. And that was the mindset that I decided to take on it, because I didn't want to, like at some point, like I became institutionalized, and I realized that I was gonna spend a lot of time in these places, and I told myself, well, this is my world, this is my life, and I stopped thinking about the streets, and my dreams became all in prison. Everything I talked about, all my plans, all my future prospects were in prison. I used to dream about prison, and I just, that became me for a while, and I have to detach from that, and I have to tell myself, no, I'm just passing by. Like this is not my life. This is not my home, and I had to start thinking about what my home, my life wanted, what I wanted my life to be like. So like I said, like you have to like, it's a whole, it's mental, it's a whole mental process, you know. But once you want, like nobody can want it more than you. Once you realize that you want that, you're gonna make everything possible, and you're gonna be an outcast, and you're gonna stand aside, and you're gonna make the decisions that sometimes are very hard. And that's another thing that the board don't realize, that a lot of times there is a lot of consequences for change, physical consequences, you know. And they expect us not to get write-ups, they expect us not to get in trouble, but you're in a place where sometimes your life is in danger, your safety is in danger, and you're gonna protect yourself, you're gonna be human, you're gonna seek safety, you know. So as much as you want to like avoid things, sometimes things come to you. And that's another thing that the board has no tolerance for. They don't have like the compassion for. Sometimes they don't understand that. So in those senses, it's not helpful, because the average citizen don't have to live with the fear that they're gonna get stabbed because they want to change their lives, right? And you have no escape. Like you stuck in this yard. This is your subculture, and you have an escape. You can go as and why, right? But when you are beginning to change, like I didn't, I was so prideful. Like I knew I was gonna get stabbed, and I chose to stay, and I chose to just be there, come out every single day, not knowing when I was gonna get stabbed or when I was gonna get beaten, and I stay there, and thank God it didn't happen. But they don't understand that it is really difficult to change in those systems.
Can we pause and talk a little bit about that? Because as you were, first of all, thank you for painting the picture. You are so good at that. I was over here like stressed and fidgeting and scared and nervous. And you're already home. I'm seeing you in front of me. Yeah, I was like nervous and scared about what was going to happen during that BPH hearing. And I was checking off in my mind all of the things that would have gotten me a denial, like the fidgeting, the eye contact, the this, the that. So, oh my gosh, my hands are like sweaty at that. But I want to pause a little bit and talk more about the environment in which you all were in, and including the safety component, other reasons why you might get a denial. So as you were talking, my mind was sifting through the hundreds of letters that I have read since doing this work. And one of the ones that I still think about this day is of this individual who wrote to me, who got a 115, who got a write-up because they weren't wearing their ID tag, or they had forgotten their ID tag, or didn't even realize they had it until CO and stopped them and told them, hey, where's your ID? And like he tried to explain himself saying, I'll go back and get it. But the CO just like wrote him up. And when he got to the BPH, he wrote in his letter that he wasn't allowed to explain what that write-up. He wasn't allowed to explain what that write-up was. See, the language barrier, that's another thing that I'm like, another denial for me. He was not allowed to explain the write-up, and that it was that he forgot his ID. And that after that BPH hearing, he got a 3-year denial. And I thought that was the wildest thing ever, that you don't another 3 years because you forgot your ID card. So can we take a moment to talk about those write-ups and how they affect you, and how in the hearing itself, like, are you able to explain yourself? Are you able to explain the circumstances? Maybe you were having a bad day. Maybe you're not allowed to have bad days in there. Can y'all talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I heard cases like that as well. I think that, so for one, concerning the ID, supposedly they want to teach us responsibility. They want to teach us to carry our ID at all times. And if we forget it, then we get a write-up. Depending on so that's something so petty, it's something so that, I mean, it's not a big deal. Like, how does forgetting your ID shows that you're still a criminal, that you're still gonna commit a crime? It doesn't make any sense. So I think that's some of the things that has to change in the system. Or like not having your shirt, like not being properly dressed as well, that you get write-ups for that, for having excessive stuff on your cell. You can get a write-up from a CO perceiving you as you being like disobeying a direct order, even if you didn't hear him, or it wasn't communicated well. And it depends on the CO. Some COs are very they don't allow you to explain yourself, and they just give you the write-up. And other COs are a little more humane, and they allow you to explain yourself. And if they want to give you the write-up, they'll give you the write-up, but they still will put in the report, this was the exchange that we had, and this was the explanation. And when you go to the board, sometimes the commissioners will also let you explain yourself and will choose to overlook the write-up because they realize that it was not a big deal. Like I had a write-up that was a one. So you get a write-up, can be a 115, and that's a serious write-up, or it can be a 128, which is like a misdemeanor. I had a 128 that I was wrongly given when I was in a class, a coding class that had a CD of music downloaded into every computer. And me and 5 other guys were accused of downloading it with a USB card. We didn't even have a USB card. When we went into the classroom, that CD had been downloaded 3 months before we all got accepted into this program, but we got the write-up, right? Because we were the newest guys in the class. And for whatever reason, they just wanted to give us the write-up. And we were all lifers. So they gave us the write-up, and we fought it. We challenged it. We appealed it, and we were able to win the appeal. But they wouldn't take the write-up of our file. What they did is they gave us another chrono saying, on such and such day, when it pertains to this incident, you guys didn't violate any rules. So I was concerned about that in the going into my hearing, because then it will come to the question where, like, did you know there was music there? Did you know that you were not supposed to have it? Right? So all these questions that can open up doors for you getting denied, and you want to be honest and upfront with the commissioners, and sometimes they don't allow you to explain yourself. Thankfully, they did not. They overlooked it because I didn't violate any rules. They saw that I had nothing to do with the incident, so they never asked me anything, but I was ready to explain. So there's like writers for whatever reason, like it can be petty. Some of them are serious. And I think like when it comes to the serious write-ups, you have to explain yourself. They want to know what was going on inside you, inside your brain. What was the thought process? And I had a friend who he got denied 7 years because he was selling food in the yard from the kitchen, right? And this is a guy who nobody helps him, nobody puts money in his books, and he was going to store for other people, and he was getting money in his books and going to store for them. He was accused of fraud and he was accused of extortion when he had not when it was not the case. And he went to the board and he was upfront. He said, "Look, this is why I was doing it. Like I was hungry. Like nobody put money in my books. Like I was trying to get a little something for myself, and I'm sorry. Like I was wrong." And he got denied 7 years for it. So it was like I get it, right? The fraud, I do get it, because when you avoid restitution, then the money, when you put money in somebody else's books, you're avoiding restitution, so the victims doesn't get the money. I understand that factor, right? But when it comes to like you trying to survive in there, I feel like sometimes they don't see that. They don't see that. Like, I mean, the food sucks, and if you don't have, that's why I tell my family, I'm like, what do you think? I never gained weight. Like, I didn't really gain weight in there because, like, there wasn't really anything good to eat, and I wasn't really going to stores. So, that was like, it's hard, it's hard. And there is a lot of things that they put that stack up against you that you cannot do, and you can get a write-up for. So it can be very unfair at times.
I appreciate those scenarios that you gave. I'm thinking back to, I want to paint a hypothetical for you, and then maybe you could tell me what would happen to this hypothetical person at board. So as you know, in prison, there's a laundry service, but your laundry comes back often dirtier than it goes in because it's washed with like 1,000 other people's stuff in laundry bags. So we wash our own clothes. To wash your own clothes in your cell, you need a bucket. Buckets are prohibited, but they often let buckets out. And then certain cops have certain hangups. So laundry lines, because you have to dry your clothes, are prohibited. Buckets are prohibited, but you can wash your clothes. You just have to figure out how to dry them. So let's paint this scenario. A person washes clothes, has a laundry line, has a laundry bucket, buys the laundry detergent that they sell on every canteen in the prison system, right? Washes it in their cell, hangs it up. Cop comes in having a bad day, because cops are permitted to have a bad day by the rules, even though we aren't, and tears down the line, takes the bucket, writes the person up. What would happen to a person that goes to board with a write-up for destruction of state property and possession of contraband, which would be the rules, Division F, that they would get written up for?
Yeah, that's a very common scenario. I think like they'll probably get denied 3 to 5 years for that, and that's another thing where I didn't understand like the things that we have to go through in there. And like you said, like a lot of times, like the laundry is not the best. I used to work the laundry, and we had a lot of cases where like your clothes gets it comes out of the bag. You lose your clothes. It comes back dirtier, and sometimes you have to wash it yourself. Like you don't trust the washer system because 8 times out of 10 you lose your stuff.
Yeah.
And then you go to the laundry and they give you dirtiest clothes, not even your sizes. And yeah, it's very unfortunate because like they will tell you like, oh well, we have a system for that, you got to rely on it. Like it shows that you cannot follow rules, so you're still a criminal. That's what they would tell you. And it's like, are you serious? Like what would you do if the laundry mat was broken in the city out here? You're gonna wash it at home, like in your house or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna find a way to make it work for you, and it doesn't make you a criminal. It makes you somebody that like you're resourceful, you're a problem solver. You're
Yeah.
gonna figure it out. So I think like when it comes to those things, it's so arbitrary, it's so petty. And
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. I've seen that
I've seen
happen.
that happen too.
Yeah.
That's why I use it as a scenario. Another
Yeah.
scenario, not to beat scenarios to death, but another scenario would be the clothing room. So you go to the clothing room, they're short of clothes. Sir, for our listeners, none of the clothes ever fit you. They have no pants that are actually anybody's size. They have large, extra large, 2X, 3X, 4X, and 5X for some folk, but that's not anybody's size. Like when I did my parole packet and I was asked what kind of pants I wanted, what was my size, I had no idea. I said 2X,
I had
and
no
I got
idea.
laughed at.
Yeah.
So you go to the laundry room and they only have 4X. They're out of 3 or 2. So you get some 4X and you cinch the waistline with a sheet because you have to have your pants. You get a write-up for sagging your pants. So you cinch it so your pants stay up. An officer sees it, takes the pants. Now you're down a pair of pants, and they give you a write-up for destruction of state property. Same scenario would happen, 3 to 5 year additional sentence, right?
Yes. It's so unfair.
It's unfair, it's petty, and intentional. It is so intentional.
In the scenario where your friend was taking food out of the kitchen and selling it, the officers it's a perk of having a kitchen job. They let you take a bag of food out so you can do what you need to with the food. We don't have refrigerating service. So you obviously are going to give the food to other people who don't have anything, develop a hustle. They sell chicken, they sell hamburger patties. So like this is something that an officer allowed that then is written up by a different officer and then gets a 3 to 5 year denial. It's crazy to me.
You know, I'm also curious, Juan, because I would love the listeners to know a little bit more about this too, is because this shook me to my core when I found out about it myself, is aside from the commissioners, who else is in the BPH room? Like, are your loved ones there, the person who was harmed? Can somebody speak on behalf of you and, you know, to talk about the growth that they've seen while you were incarcerated? Who else is present in that room?
Yeah. So when I went to board, there was 3 COs in the room. There was it was through Zoom because of the pandemic. So the 2 commissioners were in the computer, and my lawyers were in the room with me. Thankfully, if there was somebody opposing the my suitability, there would be like a victim support group opposing my suitability right there, or law enforcement can go and oppose my suitability, or any relatives of the victim can go and oppose my suitability, but no family. None of my family, nobody that wants to advocate for me are allowed there usually.
And are you allowed to engage with district attorney, victim's family?
No. So you can't even address them directly. You have to post the questions, I believe, to the DA, to the district attorney. You cannot address. You can even look at them.
When you say it out loud, it all sounds so biased, right?
Yeah.
Like essentially at this point, when you're sitting in front of the board, because of the matrix of how sentence is broken down and the way that laws go, you're at board because you've served the sentence required, and now we're finding suitability. So it seems like you should be able to have some advocacy in the room, but by design, they keep that advocacy out of the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You're walking in and you know that you have like the stacks against you, and that's the thing where it comes for you, I believe, being resilient and being hopeful, and just telling yourself like, man, I got this. Like, I'm gonna go in there and do my best, and whatever happens, happens. Yeah,
that's heavy. And I have one more question. So we know the terms that the board requires, like, so insight, remorse, accountability. And those are things that you're expected to develop on your own through a process of groups that people inside have created and come up with a board packet that people inside have taught you how to do. So you come to board and you're supposed to express insight, express remorse, and show accountability for your actions. Can you tell me like maybe what the board's definition of insight, remorse, and accountability would be?
Yeah. So insight would be like an understanding of why you committed the actions that you committed when it comes to your crime, but when it comes to your upbringing. So for example, the question like, why did you become a gang member? For me, that was so crucial. And I have to like dig back into my childhood and identify causative factors, contributing factors, like underlying factors, like all this terminology, right? That I was foreign to, and really pinpoint like, okay, like this happened and I developed this belief, I felt this way, this emotion prevailed throughout my childhood, so I started acting out this way and I made these decisions, right? So you gotta tell him almost like a step-by-step guideline, a timeline, right? We develop a timeline. So when I did my timeline, I had 23 traumas that I can pinpoint before I was 16 years old. And then my lawyer, when she saw my timeline, she said, if you give them these 3, your whole life makes sense, right? So it's like these factors, right? That things that mark you. You wanted to say something, right, Graham?
No, I was shocked at the fact that your lawyer mitigated your trauma. It just, you acknowledged 23. Let's go ahead and give him 3 and we'll just not deal with the rest. That blows my mind, but go on. Sorry.
Yeah, but I think that it was more like what the point that she was making was like these 3 traumas will make sense for you to have made the decisions you made. It was this like the 2 traumas that I had in her mind were so impactful that it will make sense. Yeah, I have 20 more. So that